Good morning, everybody. Great to see so many people dropping in. We're getting more people as we go. We're on a bit of a tight time schedule, so we'll try and keep things running along quite quickly. First of all, thank you for joining us for our first webinar in our AI for Business series. It's great to see so many people coming along. Before we start, it's a couple of pieces of housekeeping. We are recording this session so that we can share it afterwards. We're probably just going to share it with people who attend, and then you'll have the recording and any notes to refer back to. Your mics are automatically muted and the cameras are off. So please could you keep the mics muted unless we ask you to unmute. There might be a bit of interaction later on that you might need to speak. If you do want to start your camera so that we can actually see your lovely faces, then feel free to do so, but there's no pressure to do that. We are doing a couple of interactive pieces, as I mentioned in the email that I sent out. You won't be required to speak. If you want to participate in that, you'll need a smartphone capable of scanning a QR code or another browser window open at menti.com. That's menti.com. We do welcome questions throughout the session. Please could you type these either in the chat or the Q&A areas where I'll monitor them and we'll respond to them either during the presentation or afterwards. If we do need clarification on any questions, we might ask you to unmute your mic, but only if you're comfortable to do that. Okay, quickly, so on with the show. So we've got a couple of people here from Deeper Than Blue, as well as myself. So my name's Stephen Birch. I'm the marketing manager here at Deeper Than Blue. So I'll largely sit in the background for these sessions and run things. Also here is Chris Booker, Sales and Marketing Director, and Neil Murphy, Senior Business Architect. You'll see them on the screen. They are sharing their cameras, so you can see their lovely faces. So before we get to the nuts and bolts of the session, which Neil will mainly deliver, we wanted to get an idea of who's on our calls. So what I have here is a thing called Mentimeter. So what you'll need to do is get your phones out or open your browser window. So as I say, go to menti.com and you can enter the code 17051043, or you can scan the QR code on your screen and get into the app. We're going to whiz through a number of questions. You should have a screen that says you're all set. So hopefully we've got a few people in there, and I will advance that. So first question, how often do you use AI in your personal life? So all you have to do is read the question and tap the option that's appropriate to you and click submit. Like I say, we're going to rattle through these quite quickly.
I've shared the URL and the code.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So Chris just said the URLs and the codes is in the chat, so you can get to those whenever you need if you've missed that. Okay, great. So we've got a bit of a mix there, occasionally and several times a day. That's great. Next one, which AI platforms do you use in your personal life? Select all, apply. So we've got an options there of ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, Perplexity, Claude, none, something else. So ChatGPT is coming out there as quite a strong favourite. Like I say, I'm rattling through these because Neil's got the most interesting part of this presentation.
Don't get everybody's hopes.
Next question. What do you tend to use AI for in your personal life? Is it just for fun? Is it search? Is it writing, idea generation, video editing or generation, image generation, or something else entirely? Interesting. Search is coming out on top there. And then last one for the personal life. So what's your overall attitude towards AI in your personal life? Somewhat positive, straight in there.
Steve, we've just got a few people joining in the last couple of minutes.
Okay.
So I've just shared again that they can join the poll using the Menti link and the code above, but maybe just give them a chance to join and catch up on.
Okay, that's...
To make it sound like switch. AI.
Okay, so we've got a couple of people coming in afterwards. They might be wondering what on earth's going on. So we're using a tool called Mentimeter. So what you can do is, I think Chris has joined the code and the link in the chat. You might need to, you can go to menti.com and use the code 17051043 to join in our interactive part of the session. So we've just had a quick look at how you use things in your personal life, AI in your personal life. So moving on to your professional life, how often do you use AI for work? Interesting that.
There's some interesting feedback here, isn't there? You know, from a personal perspective and also from obviously a professional perspective. I think the other point to make is we will share these, won't we, after the session in terms of the feedback from the poll.
Yeah, it's all certainly really useful. Feedback. Did I see a hand go up? Did Lucy put a hand up then?
Yeah, it's mine. Could you possibly share the Menti link again in the meeting chat? Because the meeting chat, I don't know if it's not working for participants maybe, and I can't see a link. So if you could just pop that in again, that would be great, because you can't see history if you've joined a little bit late.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think so. Moving on to the next one. Does your company offer any of the following AI productivity tools on a license? So again, we've got ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, What's Next Assistant, Claude, Llama, none of these. Interesting. It kind of suggests that people aren't actually getting access to tools in the workplace. Okay, next one. If your organization is thinking of adopting AI or already does, what are the primary reasons for their interest? So is it reducing time and repetitive tasks, getting more actionable insights, or driving down costs?
Reasonably evenly split.
Reasonably, yeah. Yeah, I thought the data one's an interesting one. I was kind of expecting slightly higher on repetitive tasks, but we shall see how that changes. Okay, a bit of a long-winded one. Which of the following do you consider barriers to adoption of AI in your business? So there's a few options here. You can select any that apply.
Ooh.
Lack of awareness. That's in some way that lack of awareness or understanding is quite heartening for us, because that's kind of what we're here to tackle in this session, which bodes well for the next 40 minutes. Okay, the last question for this section. What is your overall attitude towards AI in your professional life? I'm loving this. This is good. Oh, someone had to spoil it. So we might dig deeper into that a little bit later. So, okay, that is it for that for now. We will come back to Mentimeter shortly, but I'm going to stop sharing now and hand over to Neil. If you want me.
I think I'm good now. Yeah, can you all hear me? I think so.
Yeah.
Right. So thanks very much for the participation there. I think, as Stephen said, that's quite reassuring, because hopefully the content that we prepared here lands quite nicely with there were a few very negatives, but hopefully you're still with us. So here's a bit of an overview of what we're going to cover today. We've called this Basics to Business Impact, so that's quite a broad scope. We're going to cover a range of areas, from the current market position, what some of the key providers are up to. We are going to put an AI cheat sheet together. So there are a few technical terms, but it's probably best to position this in terms of what it's not. This is not going to be a deep dive technical session. We will be doing follow-up sessions that will be more technical. You can either attend or phone a friend or send a delegate, whatever works. We won't be vendor specific. We're not going to cover everybody. We will be talking about certain vendors, mainly in terms of highlighting some of the capabilities, but we're not going to do a direct comparison across the board. And also, this is not sector specific. In both those areas, if you do have a particular area that you'd like a future event to touch on, please let us know. We're happy to run things together that are sector specific, and we will be inviting vendors to come and present at future events as well. So again, keep in touch, let us know, and hopefully we can put something together in the future that'll touch on all of those needs. So we've really only got an hour today. We're burning into that already. So let me get started. Let's just talk about the current environment and what we're finding. So what we're seeing really with a great deal of the marketplace and the people we speak to is it's a real spectrum. So over on one hand, we've got lots of businesses who are very engaged. They want to understand how AI might affect their business model, what kind of threat it might bring, and really putting their IT folks under a fair amount of pressure. What are you doing about IT? And then at the other end, we've got people who are completely sick of it. They're fed up of hearing about AI. It seems to be everywhere. This is a rehashed meme. I think now it's about AI. It's been about several subjects over the years, but yeah, right at that extreme. And then in the middle, we've got probably most people, I think, at the moment, which is so what? And the general impression we've got is maybe of being a bit overwhelmed. And I think one of the reasons for that is in addition to the fact it's very powerful and fast-moving technology, is that the news cycle around this stuff is just relentless. The media love it. There's a lot of key vendors in the space pouring absolute fortunes into the technology. Stock prices are all over the place. And lots of tech companies are actually under pressure now about, how's this actually going to deliver? How are you actually going to get a payback from all of this investment? So you've got a combination of key vendors and new versions coming out all of the time. But then there's also lots of different use cases that come out that are out and out clickbait, really. I don't know if you've seen this one. This is probably a little bit dated now, but I think it sort of sums it up for me. Where you've got a situation where you can take an audio clip, you can take a still image, and it'll actually basically put together a bit of a deep fake. It's only when you've been watching it a little while you start to realize that necessarily it's not actually real, but it's a good indication of the kind of things that's on there. And most importantly, I think that it's really what's grabbing the headlines. Generally, it's controversial and it's cool and it's a little bit creepy. Personally, I think it's a bit creepy, but these are the things that everybody's talking about. We're kind of keeping away from that. We want to really focus on the kind of tools and the kind of AI capabilities that are actually going to drive your business forward. If that actually is useful for your business, I'm interested to know how, but I'm not necessarily sure those are the things that we're focusing on. So the other thing I think that's causing a lot of problems is, or fatigue, should I say, is that just about everything is now being called AI. So back in the day, a lot of the stuff that we used to do about data analytics and machine learning, now that's been labeled as predictive AI. So yeah, it's things that we know about, but it's all coming under the same blanket. Discriminative AI, this ability to put a boundary around certain data sets and be able to use that to classify data. that's almost traditional AI now, really. That's the kind of thing that's been around for quite some time. But really, what's catching most of the headlines is the Spaniel on the right, where we're actually generating new content. So generative AI. This is something done in Stable Diffusion, where I just went onto it and said, give me a picture of a black spaniel playing in a river, tick the cinematic box, and this is the image that gets generated. So when we talk about generative AI, it's about generating content and how we can actually put that to use. So might be a bit dry, this bit. I'm going to go through it quite quickly, but it's all around the key terms, the kind of things that it's really useful just to get your head around when you're looking into AI projects, and some of the terminology you'll see from key vendors. So we touched on generative AI. Foundation models you can think of as being the underlying foundations to all of the structures. So imagine something where you've got lots of content, you've got lots of data, you've got lots of words, but you're not really good at communicating with other humans. Anybody who's worked in IT for a while might be able to relate to this, but what large language models do, the next one in the list, they're the bits that do that interpretation. They allow you to interact using just normal human speech input. The new one, really, LMM, we're seeing this a bit more now. This is where people are talking about multimodal models, and all that means is that you can interact with these models using speech and text, as well as images and graphics, both in and out, really. A couple of other things about this. Prompt engineering, you might hear, sounds quite technical. Actually, what it is about, it's just about structuring your questions better so that you get better feedback from the models when you ask it questions. So it's not really a technical piece. It can take a bit of trial and error to get the best out of some of these tools. And that's really what prompt engineering is all about. It can help avoid the next thing in the list, which is hallucination, which is a nice term. We used to call it something else. I think BS is the American abbreviation. But basically, one of the problems that you can come across is that what some of these models can do is can be quite creative. And you might find that they can give you a real convincing sounding answer that is not actually true. So there's lots of ways around that. There's various ways of structuring your prompts and getting into these pieces that actually allow you to avoid those pieces. And but when you hear the term hallucination, that's generally what people are talking about. RAG, retrieval augmented generation. I thought it was red, amber, green when I first heard this, because that's the context I'd heard it before. But really what this is about is providing some of your own information upon which an AI model can make a decision. So instead of just asking a question, you give it a document and you say, give me an answer, but use this as the reference point. And that's all we mean with those things. But it can be as simple as a simple PDF file, or it could be access to all of your enterprise data that we're actually passing to the model in order to make a decision. And then finally, honestly, fine tuning. Fine tuning is where what you do is, instead of that RAG piece where you give it the information to answer a specific question, you retune the model based on some of your data. You're getting into the expensive end of town now when you start getting into these things. You're actually having to modify the model so that it meets your needs. And in some cases that might actually be worthwhile, but it might not be where you're gonna start. So yeah, hopefully that was quick enough. Any more questions on those things? Happy to follow up, put them in the chat, and we can maybe come back to those. But hopefully that gets us started. So I'm just going to jump into the three big questions that come up in all of the meetings that we have around AI. Well, in fact, the first one comes up in every meeting we have, because we're based in Yorkshire, and how much is the first thing anybody wants to know. How much is all this going to cost? The second thing people want to know around AI is where's my data all going to end up? Where's that going to happen? And then finally, can I trust it? Can I trust the information that's coming back? What we're aiming for is transparency and clarity and traceability, really, around what information is being produced. Now, just looking at this picture on the right here, anybody who doubts the power of AI can just take one look at this, really, because the picture on the right is exactly how I think I look when I'm out running. And the one next to it is, unfortunately, the grim reality. But when you actually look at these pictures a little bit closer, I did this again using Stable Diffusion. Dropped to that picture in of me running along, and clicked the cinematic button, at which point it came up with the muscles and the hair. But what's also interesting when you look at this is The model's decided, first of all, very cleverly realised that I'm running and not taking part in some other sport, and it's put me on a running track. But it's also realised that there's a blue image behind, and that might be another runner rather than a passing wheelie bin. But then you start to notice a few other details. It's decided that I should be wearing a Nike shirt and I should be wearing Adidas shorts. So then all of a sudden you start to ask about, what is the model trained on? Why has it decided that? Where has it got that information from? How is it making those kind of decisions on my behalf? And these are all things you need to consider about how these models are constructed, where they're getting their content from, and how that's likely to impact your business. So there's a few other things around these large language models, the various things that we're going to be, and in terms of comparison, it can be difficult to compare these things. It can generally be around, size and performance. There are other things that you'll see bandied around. And again, I'm not going to go into too much detail about these, but you'll see things around the number of parameters that are in there, and they're measured in the trillions and billions of these things. Some of these new models are absolutely colossal in terms of scope. And it's generally around the size of the data, the reference site that the data's been, that the model has actually been trained on. Another thing to look at is something called context window, and this is almost, you can think about this as like working memory. So when the model's working, when it's answering a question, how much of the previous stuff can it keep in mind at any one time? Imagine reading a document and still being able to remember the first chapter when you're getting towards the end, and keeping all that thinking. That's what context window means, and the more powerful the model, the bigger the context window. However, that's not always what you need. So different use cases have different requirements. So sometimes comparing these models isn't necessarily a direct comparison between one and another. But we'll have a quick look about some of the things that you need to look at. Actually, this is an interesting resource. You can kind of go and look at the this is the LMSIS chatbot arena. There you go. I want to get the title right. What this is an example of a place where you can go and compare multiple models, put a prompt in place, compare the responses you're getting from different models, and actually you can vote on the relative performance of those things. So quite useful. The link will be in the presentation. It's worthwhile going and have a look at this, and it does take you on to allow you to do some comparisons. But again, keep in mind, not all use cases are the same. The other thing you find when you're comparing these models around performance is that there is a tendency, like we all do, to focus on our best assets. And when we're doing a comparison, maybe we'll compare against a model that might make us look slightly better. This is one from Anthropic on their latest Claude model, which is impressive, and I'm going to show you something from that shortly. But again, there's a number of almost industry approved models now that people use in order to do these kind of comparisons, but they'll then compare that against somebody else that might be doing something slightly different. So you have got some figures to go at. You can compare one model with another, but again, it's generally useful to think specifically about the use case you've got in mind. Again, some of these models are particularly good at one thing rather than another. So Claude, and this is something from Anthropic 3.5 Sonnet, it's really good at things like image recognition and pattern recognition. Image recognition in terms of taking a picture and being able to interpret that, as well as doing things like code generation. I'm going to show you this. This is a little demo. Again, you've got a use case where somebody needs to put together a presentation quite quickly. I'm giving a lecture on human genomics. I've got a couple of pictures. Here's a picture. It's showing me cost. Here's a picture showing me timelines. Can you pull that out and take that, create a series of numbers and create a JSON file, a structured text file? And you can see that's what it's doing in this window here. It's pulling all of the content, it's interpreting that graph, and it's saying, okay, in year 2000, this is what it cost, etc., and pulling those things together. So now it's created two files for me. Now, can you take the data from those charts and can you stick that into a JavaScript piece that I can stick into a presentation? I want to be able to hover on a point. Oh, and by the way, here's the color palette I'd like to use. It's pulling all that together. It's writing some code, a bit of JavaScript there, look, knocking those things out. Don't ask me to decode that. And now what it's done is it's created this piece that we can hover over, and I want to get that dropped into a presentation. So let's put that in a presentation so that I can use it in a class and use that JavaScript piece as one of the slides that I can use. There we go. There's a presentation all about genome sequencing. Here's my JavaScript-based chart. I can click on that, I can zoom on it, I can highlight it, done. So that's the latest version from Claude, again focusing on that key capability and specifically what you're looking to drive from that. All of these models are accessed in slightly different, not all, they're accessed in different ways. Not all of them are accessed through a chatbot. Some of them are through an API, which are an application programming interface where your enterprise applications might make a call to some of these services. And that's how you actually interact with it. Others, like ChatGPT, you interact with those things through a chat, a conversation type interface. And there's a whole raft of these things. Again, I've taken this little list here from a blog. I've put the link in that. If you want to go into the quite nice little, it's quite a nice little spot to go and jump off and find more details. And you can actually go and link to the actual vendor sites from this. But I'll include this in the slide deck just so you can go off and do some of those comparisons. But in general, the reason I'm talking about this is it generally comes into cost. So how much is it going to cost? Again, the universal question in these parts. We get into if you're accessing these things via an API, it's almost on a consumption-based model. So everything's measured in tokens, which you can think of as a token. And if you are quite technical, you might be cringing at this point, but assume a token is about 70% of a word in terms of interaction with the model. So you're sending data in, you're retrieving data out, you're getting responses. And what a lot of these models do when you're interacting with APIs is they lump the tokens together, and you pay an amount of money, you get this many tokens, and you're able to go and interact with it. But I think the other thing to point out on this slide is that not all of these models are the same. So GPT-4o is the most advanced multimodal model from GPT, for example, and I'm just picking on them specifically. And you've got a price per million tokens for input and a price per million tokens for output. They also, GPT do other models, which again, are much more cost efficient. They're smaller. They may suit a different use case. So again, you can see they're a lot cheaper when you start interacting with those things.
I think the other point to add here, Neil, is that we will see more and more smaller language models come into the market. And if people think about the iPhone 16 release, that's the start of where you'll start to see these smaller models being deployed. So going back to Neil's point earlier, not everything has to be a large model at the end of the day.
No, what we're seeing also with a lot of the vendors is that they tend to tune and select these models based on their core business and how they're going to function in that. So Apple's a good example. Obviously, what they're interested in are portable devices, low power consumption, so as much local capability. But they can also be quite specific in terms of what that model is going to be used for. And again, that allows you to keep the cost down. The fine-tuning piece I referenced earlier in terms of that, that's where you're starting to get expensive. And again, there's additional costs if you want to start picking those things up. But some of the other models that, again, looking at the survey, people may be a bit more familiar with. So like ChatGPT, where you're using an ongoing interaction, or Copilot, or from Microsoft, or Gemini from Google. Again, there's usually a free version. It's usually limited in some respects in terms of the amount of interaction you're allowed, or you can upgrade. So here's the ChatGPT, $20 a month. Copilot, I think, is $30 a month when you have that license, but there's different flavors of that, again, which we'll come on to. Again, that's more on a subscription basis, and there'll be enterprise licenses, and there'll be other models and various other things to consider. So apologies, I can't tell you exactly how much it's going to cost. It depends, and there are a lot of variables that are feeding into that. Privacy, again, what's happening to my data? Some of these AI assistants are collecting lots of data. They're collecting conversations, location. They are taking usage information. They're using that to train their models, and perfectly legitimate. And people, as long as people are aware of that, obviously, when you get into a commercial setting, into an enterprise setting, that might become much more of an issue rather than people using this in their free time. And lots of other organizations are going to great lengths to discuss privacy and how your data is protected. So this is, for instance, from the terms and conditions that Microsoft are putting out there in terms of, look, we're looking after your data. It's staying within that Microsoft 365 environment. So if you're already a 365 Office user, your data is going in the same place. We're not using it to train models, is what Microsoft is saying. and you've got control over transparency and who gets to see your data. There are a couple of things in there, little disclaimers to say, look, none of this has been trained unless you say so. So there'll be little checkboxes to make sure you're covering off. And again, always check these T's and C's in terms of what the vendors are doing and how those things are provided.
But just be cautious in terms of putting confidential information into public models, because effectively your data could form part of the next training run, and that might not be something, certainly from a finance an exec perspective, that you'd wish to happen.
Yeah.
Just be careful with that. But as Neil said, when you have a private model, that's part of your own data. It's isolated to you. It won't make its way into a public model.
It's all of these vendors have got slightly different T's and C's. Just be aware in terms of what we're signing up to, and yeah, let's check the small print. Again, some vendors, I'm calling out IBM here, in terms of part of their offering is actually around the governance framework. So not only is it around the hosting of the data, where the data is going to be used, assurances that none of that data ever gets used for training, it's having a wrapper around that, so you can actually keep an eye on the model and how it's behaving. So once people have started to interact with an AI model, you want to make sure that we're not getting into hallucination territory, and that you're still getting the kind of responses that you'd hope for. The other thing I'll touch on briefly is around open source. So again, there are open source models out there, a number of vendors, IBM again being one of them, who call out that a lot of their models are open source, so you can actually see under the covers in terms of how those things are put together. But most of the large vendors provide open source models which are free to deploy locally, anywhere, on your own hardware, and maintain overall control. The piece around cost effectiveness here and the licensing fees, well, you know, what you gain on the swings you might lose on the roundabouts, because the hosting costs can be quite significant if you're getting into those pieces. So again, it's worthwhile having a broad look. I've put a link down there to Hugging Face. That's worthwhile having a look at. That's generally the central location used for finding and using open source models, and you might find that there are some sector specific models that have been deployed there. There's some interesting pieces which again are all available for you.
I think one area where we may see this open source models and being used more is on premise.
Yeah,
where companies are maybe under tighter restrictions around regulation, compliance, maybe data sovereignty. So that's something just to be aware of, and you may wish to run these models locally on your own hardware, and that's something that people are starting to do more, I think it's fair to say.
And again, I think in terms of transparency and understanding how the models are being trained, they're quite useful pieces. I'm going to show you something here as well in terms of some of the key vendor offerings. And again, we're going to pick a couple of examples here. They're doing something slightly different here. This is an example from Microsoft of their. This is for Copilot for Office 365. I did this demo earlier and recorded it, so I am cheating, so I can talk over it and speed it up. But here's an example of having Copilot, which is actually part of Office 365. I've got a very long email. I can click on a button here and say, can you summarize this for me? And what it'll then do is give me the key points and ask me and give me the actions. Now I've got a choice. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to reply to this. I'm going to reply directly, and I'm going to get Copilot to draft me a response. In general, I'm happy and I'm going to respond. So it's going to give me a high-level view. The high-level view is a bit RoboCop. So I'm going to click on a button here and say, can you make this sound a bit more casual? And it's going to rework that for me and tell me it's got my I've got the instructions. Maybe I'm going to ask it if they want some help with a flyer. I'm good at putting flyers together. Maybe I can help them out with that. So I'll ask it to rework that, but asking this additional question. It's going to come back and it's going to give me a draft. Looking at that, yeah, we've got the stuff in there around the flyer. Okay, right, I'm happy with that. But yeah, let's go ahead and send that. Let's send that off. Okay, so I've gone from a very long email into a summary, and I'm more than happy with that. And now I've got another email. I'm going to put something together. I want to run an event, and I want to get some help. So I'm going to do a draft with Copilot, and I want it to draft me an email, and it asks me about my idea for a 5K run for a charity, and what do they think about it, and if they've got any experience of putting this stuff together. So generate me an idea for that. Okay, it's having a think. It's got an idea. It's drafted me some information on there. It's put me a general. That generally seems okay. Yeah, I'm okay. But what I'll do this time is I'll get some coaching. So rather than reworking it, I'll just ask Copilot what it thinks of it. So I'm going to get some coaching on this. It's going to analyze that. It's going to give me some key points, and it's coming up with okay. First of all, tone. It thinks I should have a bit more enthusiasm. I should put things in like I'm thrilled to share, or I have an amazing idea. It's clearly never been to Yorkshire. We're not getting that enthusiastic, so I'm going to ignore that particular piece of advice. Thank you. Let's see what it says about reader sentiment. You know, is it going to engage? It's saying I need to engage with the reader more. What does it mean by that? Okay, I should put their names. Well, these are people I know, so you know we send each other emails all the time. So I'm going to take that bit with a pinch of salt as well. And then I've got something on clarity. Any ideas on clarity? Okay. Well, it's saying that I should include something about location and where this is actually. That's a fair point. Yeah, that's a good idea. So where's it going to take place? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to update this. I was thinking Park Street, be a good location, etc. And it's going to put that together for me. Right, happy. Okay, so I'm now in a position to send that. So that's an example of how Copilot works inside Microsoft Office 365. So the way Microsoft are pitching this, clearly their objective is to add additional value and capability into their existing Office suite. So Copilot integrates with those things, and it's adding value, and you have to pay for the privilege. So it's $30 a month per user to have that capability. It offers different pieces and different capability within different aspects of Office. So you can have it running in Teams, and you can get it to help you with Excel and other components. And we've got, or you can, instead of having it by Office, you can just access it through the web interface and start to ask it questions. I'm not going to show all of this one, but basically this is giving you an indication of where the ideas for the run came. The key point I want to make on this is that when you just look at this top button up here around web, when I'm interfacing with Copilot here, it's going out to the web in order to respond to my questions. But there's a little work button there at the top where instead of it going out externally, it's going to start looking internally at various of the components that that we might be using. So, you know, we'll get to the point where let me just show you this. Right. So tell me who was organizing that last event. You know, who's organizing that last event, and whether there was any kind of slide deck that they used in order to put that together. What's the deck that we used to present to donors? And there we go. It's going to go now and find that, see that information, and make that available to me. So it's a productivity gain. It's small little steps that actually save me 5 minutes, 10 minutes either way. And they're pitching this as, you know, your personal AI assistant. Now, words of warning, right? So we put all the good stuff out there and it looks really cool. And this is all, you know, helps you find data. But a couple of things. First of all, this stuff is quite quick to deploy, can be quite quick to deploy. And as a result, might make you think that it's relatively easy. But things to consider. How do you measure and how do you monitor those value, the value that you're actually creating? Those little 5 minutes are all easy. Absolutely, they definitely, it could make people more productive. A large swathe of your user population won't use it. It's quite difficult to understand exactly how to quantify the benefits that the people who are using it are actually achieving. So in terms of getting your business case moving, be quite cautious, be quite careful about how you actually deploy this stuff in your business. All those $30 a month will start to add up, and the value can be hard to measure. The other thing to consider here is that that was really quite powerful, wasn't it? How I went, who did the last slide deck, and can you open that up for me?
Sure.
Lots of organizations, whether they'll admit it or not, rely on security by obscurity. You might actually have a lot of access to a lot of data that you don't know about. So you need to make sure your house is in order before you start passing these kind of tools out and putting information in front of people that they might have access to, but maybe don't necessarily need. And then the final one is it can be quite quick to deploy. So shadow IT and people running up costs because they can input a credit card and kick off a service are things that you need to keep an eye on. So our advice, pick a small team of users, pick a specific use case, monitor the areas that you are getting value from, and then maybe revisit and see whether or not Copilot is always the way that you want to see that happen. I'm going to touch on a couple of other things from not as many videos, but Amazon Bedrock. Amazon's approach is it's almost like a department store for large language models. So they'll host and they'll enable third-party models. They have some of their own as well. It's very much sort of developer focused, as you'd expect, and the documentation is there to match. They have what they call their Bedrock Studio prototyping environment and a training environment, and they are good environments to go and skill up. And again, in terms of their approach, they're trying to leverage the fact that your application data might already live here, and that this might be a good place for you to start and host sort of AI services. So that's how they see it, and as a result, they're offering a range of interaction and integration tools. Likewise, Google. Again, a lot of people hosting systems and services in the Google Cloud, and if your data is already there, then some of their models might also seem attractive. They have a very large range of their own models, and as Chris alluded to, some of these are quite lightweight on device. Others are massive, absolutely huge. These guys have been in the AI space for a few years now. They obviously got started with a lot of that image recognition stuff, with Google Lens, and they're focusing again more on their kind of consumer content, and also providing the Copilot-like tool, which they also call Gemini. I think it was Bard, wasn't it? And then they rebranded it.
It was called Bard.
Yeah, they rebranded it.
Rebranded to Gemini for Workspace.
Yeah. So again, it's adding additional value to their workspace offering and trying to get people into those kind of spaces, but a similar kind of model. Final one of the big vendors I'm going to come to is IBM. I think they're very much different from these other vendors in this space. They don't tend to get a lot of coverage from the kind of consumer focused news market. You don't, and you'll have seen in those previous pieces, a lot of their models don't necessarily get listed in those comparison pieces, but they've got a very long history with the AI stuff. I mean, I've got a quote on there from Gary Kasparov. That's back in 1996. So they've been doing the AI piece for quite a long time, got very deep technical capability. But they've also looked at this. They're focused on the B. They're focusing on the business aspect of this, and they're trying to remove the barriers of adoption by looking at like transparency of their models. They've started with their underlying models, and as we were, talking about the content, they've taken out hate speech and profanity and any kind of IP or GDPR, anything that's going to get you into trouble. They've taken that out, and then they've used that data set in order to train their models. And it's also very much business specific content. So even though their models are not as big, and some of those metrics that we talked about earlier might not look as impressive, the actual responses and the outputs that you're getting from those models can actually be better than some of the bigger and frankly more expensive models.
And they do indemnify companies who use their models.
Okay.
So,
so they're putting their money where their mouth is.
The money where their mouth
right.
is.
Okay. So again, I personally, my background's in healthcare and pharma and finance, and all of these things around risk were the first things that would get derail any kind of project. So really happy to see these things going in place, and as a result, it's been one of the areas that we've looked at in terms of providing sort of business focused offerings. Okay, so that's touching on the vendors. The bit that we were talking here was about business impact, and this is probably what you're interested in seeing about. Right, you need to get some runs on the board. We're all in the same boat. We've got this great technology. How do we get some value from it? What are the key areas? For us, for all of the multitude of use cases, they sort of boil down to three key areas. It's engagement and personalization. It's actually improving the experience of the customer or the end user or the person that you're interacting with that's engaging with your digital services. Think about it as another better way of interacting with your data and asking questions of the data and information you've got within your organization. And then insight and analytics, again, putting that data and that information directly in the hands of people who are making decisions and moving that along. And then finally, automation, repetitive tasks, things that can derail and slow down organizations' ability to scale. So those are key areas we feel that if you're looking to make an impact with AI in your organization, that you need to really start to focus on, rather than getting distracted with some of the other bits and pieces. Now,
I think the important thing to say here, Neil, is that in this next stage where you're talking through these
Yeah.
examples.
Yeah.
This is about assisting colleagues, consumers, not replacing.
Yeah.
So it's how we take people to a higher level in terms of their productivity, but equally how we raise the bar in terms of quality of how we interact and consistency of how we interact with internal stakeholders, but also with our customers.
I'm going to show you a few examples here. We try to keep these quite brief, but hopefully these will resonate. Maybe get you thinking about some of the opportunities that you've got. We're starting with the big ticket items here about what do cats know about IT, what do cats know about AI. This is something that we put out. You might have seen some of our social media pieces that we did around the Euros. We were trying to get cats to predict the outcomes of the games, and as you can see, they were useless because England won that one. But on a broader topic, we actually used AI to first of all come up with, what we used to call machine learning. We adopted machine learning models to predict the outcomes of results. But then we also built an interactive pundit that we could use. The interesting piece was from our point of view, discovery point of view, was that we were able to change the tone and the expression and the way in which we interacted with this stuff. So the language it was using was trained. So over time, it got better and better at sounding like somebody who should be stood behind a microphone on a touchline. And it was quite an interesting use case. So we were also able just to ask it how it thought the outcome of the game was going to be, and then it would go and look at that data that we'd created using some of the machine learning models. So it was a bit of fun, but quite a nice use case for us to get into. A bit more real world is this one around expert systems. So the use case here is, imagine you're in an organization where you have a group of people that go out repairing equipment. And in this case, it's central heating boilers. So the use case here is my central heating boiler's broken. I've called out an engineer, and then the engineer's out there on the road, and they're using what we used here was IBM Watson X Assistant to go away and ask what the next call out was. All right. So what it's done, I've just asked it what my next call out is. It's gone to Jira. It's pulled up the Jira token, which is showing me a service desk, effectively.
Case management solution.
Yeah, a case management piece that's going to show what my next call is, and it's pulled the description out and let me know where to go. He's arrived on the job, and now wants to replace the O-ring. So he's just going to ask the model, right? You know which model I'm working on. These O-rings are leaking. How do I repair them? It'll go away. It's got access to all of the manuals for all of the boilers for all of the customers, and it's now going to give me details of how I can replace the particular component, and give me a step-by-step. Let me know if you need any further assistance. So it's now waiting. What else do you need? No, that's all gone really well. All done. Now what it's going to help with is the bit that none of the engineers like to do. No engineers I've ever met anyway, which is, do you want to write up a summary of this? Or do you want anything else? Do you want to include anything else in the reports? Here's a summary. This is what we're going to add back into the ticket so that the next time an engineer shows up, they're going to have some background. Are we happy with this summary? Is there anything else you want to add? Let me read that. Yeah, no, I'm not happy with that. I want to put something else into this summary. I'm going to add something else in. Additional input. Right, include that 2.6 error. That's now gone, and also that the boiler still stinks of. Right, okay, well, that might not be the language we want to use. That's not going to appear in the official report. It's not the kind of language we want to encourage. So what the model is going to do is replace that, and you can see that now it says reminiscent of cigarette smoke, which is a bit more appropriate. Yes, we're happy with that. It's going to add that into the summary and capture that outcome. The Jira ticket gets updated, or the service desk ticket gets updated, and that information is captured. So it's quite a nice use case. One of the things we like here is this is very much boots on the ground rather than being, you know, the clerical type solutions that we've seen up to date.
It's an expert advisor at the end of the day, isn't it? Assisting an engineer do their daily job.
A couple of other points on that. First is, if you are going to put in a new use case, again, the ability to interact with an AI model doesn't always have to be through one of these the chat capabilities. It can be using other models, and also it also means that in terms of the responses, you've got different ways to interact with people that you don't necessarily have a great deal of control over. So we've got another example here. This is a demo that we did for with working with South Yorkshire Police, and the use case here is you've had an emergency, you've had a large event, you need to get a lot of people on site very quickly. I need to get in touch with a large number of staff very quickly, give them the details and see whether or not they're available. So the complexity here comes not only from the fact that I've got a very broad group of staff. They might have all different qualifications, different needs, and they at this time are not in the building or they're not at work. So how do we reach them? How do we get in touch with them? In this case, again, we've used the Watson X Assistant model. It's got an adapter into Twilio, which gives us an SMS gateway, which means that I can actually use the assistant at this end to get messages and begin an interaction with people out on the ground.
So we're talking about using different channels of communication depending on people's level of sophistication.
Yeah, and part of this comes from the fact that in the past, when this information was going out, there was a fair amount of human interaction necessary in order to process the responses that were coming back from staff, because it was all done in free text.
Yeah.
So now what's happening is that people are using the power of the generative AI platform to send in information just using standard text, standard speech, and that information can be reworked into a standard form, and you're effectively taking the administrator out of that process. So in the beginning piece here, what we're doing is we're capturing the questions that want to be that we want the responses to, and then this gets sent out and mobilized. I'm conscious of time. I'm just going to skip to the other end of this presentation here. And now what we can see is the response that this is what the boots on the ground are receiving, right? So there's been this issue. This is what I've received. How quickly can you respond? What's happening is I'm coming back and say I can be there in 2 hours. Where are you going to respond to? Actually, I'm going to respond to Barnsley. Well, if you're not familiar with the Barnsley geography, the only one of those in that list is Penistone that's in that area. I don't have to the model knows that. It doesn't have to ask me the question again. It'll just work those things out and again come up with the summary, give me this information. So once that request has gone out, the person that's coordinating the responses doesn't have to be involved in the process. They just wait for the data and then get the responses coming back. Now, we've done this for policing. We're also talking to a hospitality organisation who, again, people phone in sick. I need to cover shifts.
So rostering staff.
Anywhere you need to roster staff. Again, this seems relatively trivial, but can take hours. And again, if you can integrate your back-end enterprise systems into this with your rosters, it's a really nice way of allowing your staff to interact with the model without necessarily having to do anything different. They're just getting a text message and having to respond in that way. I'm going to move on. Okay. So again, back in the e-commerce world here, what we've got is somebody looking for where's my order, right? So again, these AI-driven assistants are really quite powerful in being able to track down and interpret the previous interaction you might have had in an e-commerce setting. So here, and that's gone quite quickly, hasn't it? Here what we're seeing is somebody coming online and being able to inquire upon the status of their order simply by using the interactive agent. Now, it's not a chatbot. People get fed up with chatbots and they get quite frustrated with using these things. But actually, compared to hanging on the phone and hearing that their call is important to us, it can be quite a quick way of getting an issue resolution, especially if you've gone through the process of giving people the option to speak to a human operator if they need that, right? So it can work quite nicely in those spaces.
Here as well is that this can handle speech So it's feasible for somebody to call in and talk to the system.
Yep.
And for that to be converted into text and be calling APIs.
Absolutely.
Where it comes into its own is not everybody uses the web channel. So
Yeah.
if you've got branches or you've got stores, then it can process and provide a customer service angle for people who haven't interacted through the web.
Yeah. I also want to call out this. This is another piece again in terms of where you're adding value. Again, rather than necessarily navigating on a website, I might come to an e-commerce site. In this case, this is House Timber, and I'm making a patio. I want some advice. What we're showing here is that what you're typing into the Watson assistant here is actually driving the responses that we're seeing from the website. So I'm saying I'm looking at paving. When I put in that I'm looking for grey paving, all of a sudden I'm getting an update in terms of the website that fits my criteria. And again, I could use that to add an item into my inbox. I could give it the dimensions of the patio I've got in mind, and it could come up with various pieces. It's adding additional capability into that transaction, and we're using AI in order to interact with that e-commerce piece. Right, a few use cases. I'm conscious we went through quite quickly there at the end there. In terms of our approach, right, and the first thing to do, hopefully that gives you something to think about, right? You've got different flavors. Is it going to be office-bound people who are looking to save various time off administrative functions? Is it operational? Are you helping skilled operatives or skilled people out there in order to save time? We've got this sort model that we use in order to identify use cases. It's mainly from a kind of ideation point of view. In terms of if we look at where AI can drive value, being able to synthesize a lot of information like we saw in the boiler demo there and looking across the lots of documentation is a use case. You can reduce the amount of irrelevant skills that people are doing using that kind of optimizing people and optimizing component, maybe deflecting certain tasks that are not really appropriate. You can look at speeding up routine activities, and then again in the boots on the ground demo there, you can triage activities by actually quickly pulling together activities and data required in order to make quick decisions and keep people informed. So we use this sort model in terms of some of those engagements, again as an early part of the process. In terms of getting started, kicking off these kind of process, ideas, assets, capabilities, and starting points are things to keep in mind. So consider the potential for internal use cases. Our sort model helps with that ideation process, and then filter this. We don't like Death Star projects. Putting something in place that's going to solve everybody's needs and doing that first, it's never a good thing to start with. Keep the scope small. Keep the number of people involved relatively small, and then focus on the value and keep checking back to make sure that you're actually in a position where you can deliver. In terms of capabilities, review your foundations, look at governance, look at the security, and look at the quality of the data you're in place, and then go and consider what the best starting points are, both in terms of existing relationships with vendors and where that actually might be a good place to start. Start small, keep the scope tight, and make sure you can measure the value are really the bits that the advice that we can offer.
So next steps in terms of how to get started. One of the things we'll do post-webinar is share with you our Let's Get Started paper, which will hopefully give you a combination of cheat sheet and ideas of early stage projects. We typically look at projects of no longer than 6 to 8 weeks in terms of proof of concept, and then if they are proving successful, scale those out and take those to a broader community and then eventually into production. So it's very much about fast start. In terms of next steps, if you're not quite ready, then we will be running webinar 2 of AI for Business, and that will be confirmed as a date shortly. We're targeting late November for that. If you'd like colleagues to be educated in what you've just seen in terms of this webinar, we will be running this again in November as well. So Basic to Business Impact AI for Business will run mid-November, and again we'll confirm dates after today's session. If you are at a stage where you'd like to progress and you'd like to look at use cases or problem statements that you'd like to address within your business, then we are running an AI readiness exec workshop. It's a free half-day session. You're welcome to sign up for that, and we'll follow up after this session. Either drop Neil or myself or Steve an email and we'll be in touch. And for organisations that are already progressing with AI, we've got a deeper AI lab where you can actually road test in terms of development, testing and learning about how these models and how these platforms work. That's a larger commitment than the exec workshop. But again, if it's something that you're either stuck with your AI projects or you've got some that you want to actually build out, we will help you do that through that process of deeper AI lab.
Okay, great. So and we're a little bit after time. Thank you everyone very much for sticking around. There is just one more quick Mentimeter if you're still willing to do that. So I've just taken control of the screen again. So again,
Any questions?
Nielsen said, are there any questions? We've had nothing dropped into the chat, so I'm assuming not, unless you want to drop something in now. In the meantime, let's have another quick look at the Mentimeter. So there's a QR code there again in case you missed it, and the code. Two questions. This is the word cloud. So what are you most excited about AI, either in personal life or professional life? Just a word or a couple of words. Let us know what you think. See if anything pops up.
Oh, I'll see what that is.
Okay. English. Oh.
A couple of minutes. Anything else? Someone might like an essay.
Yeah, a little bit.
Excellent. That's looking good. Great. Okay.
Oh, leave it. Let's let people. That's it.
That's looking good. Thank you for that. Next one is, in your business, where do you think AI could be used? It might be a couple of, might be a business area, it might be a particular use case. Obviously, we're not expecting, it'd be great if you want to come and join us and get your use cases turned into proof of concept bites. That's great. We're not expecting this is a contract, so don't worry about that.
No, we're just keen to understand what people's thinking is, the areas of the business, whether it's internal, external, consumer facing, as to how people are thinking this can be a benefit to the business, isn't it?
Well, not online. Have you unmuted? That's fine. Are we getting that?
There's some good examples there, really good examples of how this can be used in somebody's business.
Excellent. That's really, really good. Because I think this will also help us think about future content for these events as well.
Yeah, as we look at webinar 2 and webinar 3.
HR and marketing always come up, don't they?
Yeah, they're very consistent use cases, aren't they? But it's within marketing, within HR, what you would want to enable with AI. And we've got some good examples there to share in future sessions.
Yeah.